Check. All right.
That'd be painful.
Well, hi folks, how y'all doing? Thanks for coming out. Nice to see you. Nice to see y'all again. Good to see like the familiar faces and the new faces, of course. I attribute it all to that email, that panicked email that I sent out 45 minutes ago. Yeah, so things are already going a lot better than the last time because number one, we were actually recording the slides. So for anyone that joined remotely last time, couldn't see the slides. We're actually recording the slides this time. And that way also, when we put this on YouTube, the people that watch the YouTube video will be able to see the slides and not just all of you guys sitting there, which is what's on YouTube from the last one. So if you were here, you're all on YouTube watching a talk. And I also feel really extra snazzy because I learned how to use the pen and zoom functionality. So now there's also going to be the speaker talking as well on YouTube. So it'll be like the slides and the speaker. This is so great, you know. I mean, it only took me 2 years to get it right. I got it right. So the only thing that we sort of failed on is that here, if we had an extra laptop, we could have put HDMI and we could have gotten like holiday themed YouTube stuff happening down here. That would have been super slick, but I still feel pretty good about things. So welcome. This is the last edition of the year. And want to thank you all for being here over the past year and helping to kind of grow this and shape this into a fun night that we do most months. And yeah, I'm gonna start yammering on about my stuff. But before I do that, if you did want to connect to the network, you can get on Shopify Guest Network with that password. Welcome to Shopify. And we do have guest fobs. I believe that they're on that table out there in the hallway. Just if you wanted to go to the bathroom and then come back in, you should grab yourself a fob. That'll be the easiest way to get in and out if there isn't somebody at the door for you. So today you're stuck with me as the speaker. And I always try to do short talks, but they always go a lot longer than I was planning. So I'm a tech writer here at Shopify, and today I want to talk about WTF as a tech writer anyway. What is it that we're all doing here? I figured since it was the last event of the year, it was a time to kind of reflect. The holiday time is a time to reflect on some of the people that have spoken here in last year and in previous years, and some of the things that they've been talking about. So Alex from last time said, if we continue to move towards better UX, user experience, technical documentation can effectively become obsolete. That was the premise that she was arguing against in her talk. Andrew Eder from Amazon, when he was talking about what is a tech writer, he said, well, tech writers don't write. At least don't write often anyway. Technical writers, first and foremost, are testers and researchers. Communicating that knowledge is the last step of the process and rarely shouldn't take more than 10% of your time. And Rob Hanna, when he was here, he gave a talk called TechCom Goes Back to the Future, which is really interesting. It was about how his experience with sort of the internet 1.0 and how TechCom said, well, you know, it's a gimmick and all of that, and we're going to stick with our publishing printed materials. And the head of marketing sort of took over and got the bigger budgets and all of that. And we're at a similar sort of inflection point now where there's the whole issue of micro content and the kind of impact that's going to have on technical communication. And if we don't take action as members of the TechCom community, it's the head of the user experience who has a seat at the boardroom table, has a technology budget 20 times bigger, and is asking the same questions. Do we still need tech pubs? So people are asking, do we still even need technical pubs? And if Andrew Eder is saying that technical writers don't even write, so what the fuck is it that we do then? So I also came across this great blog post by Tom Johnston, who has a blog that some of you might have heard of, called "Every Project is Monster You Battle and Slay." I've been thinking of a quote I once heard about writing being a monster that you battle and slay. I couldn't initially find the quote, but I liked the idea. that writing projects are monsters that you go up against. This couldn't be more perfect a description for a recent project of mine. So with this premise that potentially tech writers are monster battlers, I thought that I would pull from a recent experience of mine, one of my tech writing projects, to see if we can probe that premise and see if maybe that is what we are. So before we do that, well, you need to figure out what the fuck payment processing is. So this experience of mine had to do with documenting some payment processing for our platform at Shopify. I write API documentation for third-party developers that are trying to write apps for the Shopify App Store. Some of these apps may enable you to sell products on platforms like Facebook or other types of platforms where you may want to make your products available for sale. So as a Shopify merchant, you have a bunch of products that you manage in Shopify, and you'd like people on Facebook to be able to purchase them. And so in order to do that, you can install a sales channel app in your store, and that app will enable you to make those sales. And the developer of that app is going to need to integrate into the app a way for processing payments. So there's a way that you can do it more directly with Shopify. We have a card vaulting system, and you can code your application directly against our card vault. When you do this, though, you take on a lot of something which is called PCI compliance liability. So that's like a credit card mumbo jumbo term. And it basically means that like you take on all of this responsibility because you're handling sensitive credit card information. So only the most sort of like hardcore apps that are able to build in a lot of those kind of security mechanisms are going to want to go that route. You can also work with some of our third-party payment processing providers, like you might have heard of the company Stripe. So we have an integration with Stripe that enables Stripe to basically handle a lot of that sensitive information on your behalf and kind of pass it to Shopify in a slick way, and you don't really have to worry about credit cards. And we have another company that we work with called Spreedly, and that's a similar kind of thing, but a little bit different. So I'm not going to go into it any more than that because it's boring. But I had to write documentation for Stripe and Spreedly back when sales channels first launched at Shopify, which would have been about 2016. And at the time, I was working with another fellow, and he kind of took on the Spreedly stuff, and I kind of took on the Stripe stuff. So I like tested the Stripe stuff end to end. I used my Postman REST client, and I made calls into the Shopify API, and I made calls into the Stripe API, and I like got an end-to-end working solution. And my friend, who was working at Shopify at the time, he did the same thing for Spreedly, and he kind of like showed me the steps and handed it off to me, and I kind of wrote up the docs. And I never actually went through the steps myself, though. And this is something that would come back to bite me, come back to haunt me later, because that individual ended up not being at Shopify anymore when it came time to dust off these docs for our GraphQL APIs. So we had everything in place for the RESTful APIs, but we needed to do it for GraphQL, and I couldn't get the thing to work. And the engineers that were working with me that wanted me to get this documentation done, they didn't really know who I was supposed to talk with. So I ended up searching through my emails, because I knew like back in 2016 that there was somebody from Spreedly in my emails back there. And so I sent an email to them, which never got returned. And at this point, I was a little bit stumped because I didn't really know where to go from there. There's a link to the documentation. So if you come across these slides later and you really want to know what I do here for a living, you can follow that link. Yeah, so they didn't really know who I should work with internally. And the person in charge of the account setups, like they knew about like, so this is the individual that is more like an account manager or something. So a new partner comes on and wants to develop an app for Shopify, and they want payment processing. This is like an account manager who will say like, okay, you need this permission, you need this, you need that. You should be able to turn all this stuff on and it'll work. So that person could give me that information, but he couldn't give me that more like low-level developer workflow kind of stuff, which is where I was getting stuck. So at some point, somebody, I don't know who it was, I went through my correspondences, my Slack messages, my GitHub stuff, but somebody knew about this like Shopify Spreedly Slack channel that we have. So I guess at some point the developers decided to open up this like joint Slack channel so that they could talk about like the integration and how it works. And so I figured, okay, I'm going to get into the Slack channel and everyone's going to know all about it. Wrong. And they were talking about stuff like real like core app, like back end stuff that just like I'm like, whoa, like there's way more to this than meets the eye. And like nobody seemed to understand what I was talking about. I'm like, like third-party developers that want to, code apps against our platform. But lo and behold, eventually somebody popped up in that channel who could get me set up with a test account, because that is what I needed. I needed a test account on Spreedly. So with that, I was able to go into Spreedly, I was able to sign up, and I was able to like, basically they were able to do like this process in their backend to like recognize me as like the type of API client that I needed to be in order to do this process. Because otherwise I was going to need to like pay $200 of my own money or something to sign up for their service. I'm like, look, I mean, I like my job, but I don't really want to go out of pocket $200 here. So I was super stoked. I was going to go through the steps and everything seemed to be working. And then it all crapped out on the last step, of course. So here's a little bit of my little journey there. So you can see at the beginning, I'm all excited and optimistic. I'm like, oh, things are coming together. I've added Shopify as a receiver. I can get back and payment ID. It's going to be so good. However, when I try to complete payment for hosting and Shopify ID, it's not working. And then a little bit later, hey, folks, so here's a staging server. I'm really trying hard to get people to care about what I'm doing here. Everything is working except the last step when I try to complete the stupid thing. If you could just check out my server, that'd be great. And then this is where you can see I'm really unraveling. So this is as far as I've managed to get. Do you know of any partners currently using Spreedly so we can investigate some logs or something to see what they're configured? Also wondering if maybe I'm missing a manual step, blah, 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 some confidential stuff there maybe, to work with Spreedly. I'm asking because we do have a manual step like this in place. So, you can tell I'm kind of at the depths of my despair there. My dark night of the soul, as it were. So this is when I started to really question my value as a tech writer, and when the monster of imposter syndrome started to rear its ugly head. I thought I should have done a better job the first time around with Spreedly, rather than just sort of farming it out to my friend and kind of taking it on his word that the thing was working. I should have done my due diligence then and gone through all the steps, and it would have saved me from all this pain and anguish. Things got so bad that I was even asked if we wanted to just ship the thing as it was and then fix it later based on support debt from the field. What the fuck? No. Yeah. That would have been a big loss for me and a big loss of face with my tech writing companions, because there is a bit of an unwritten rule in tech comm circles that goes, "Thou shalt never publish erroneous information that has not been audited or validated." It's a bit like the code that samurai assassins have in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill. Some things, once you do, they cannot be undone. And this was a similar point that Tom Johnston got to in his journey, where he talked about how he's been watching a lot of Outlander, and there's a guy that was driven to the depths of despair, and he was lying in his bed, and the only thing that could help him was that his wife had to descend into the madness and the darkness with him, and eventually she brought him out of his torpor and brought him back to life. So I guess this was also when I maybe needed someone to descend into the darkness, or maybe I needed to become more of a monster myself to take on the monster. I don't know. But as luck would have it, there was someone that was willing to descend to the darkness with me. A new junior developer started on the team. And they said, hey, you want to help Andrew with this Spreedly stuff? And holy cow, he managed to get the missing step to work. And then in the process, I learned a lot about templating languages. I learned a lot about payment processing in general, and how Stripe and Spreedly payment integrations differ from one another at Shopify. Thank you. Yes, it felt freaking great. What? Godfather Part 3 again? How did we get back here? The thing is, this is still not over. I keep trying to get out and they keep pulling me back in. I actually today, as I was writing this presentation, I got a message on that Spreedly Slack channel from a technical sales specialist at Spreedly who wants to make sure the technical aspects of using Spreedly and Shopify are being communicated to customer-facing folks at both of our organizations. So I'm getting pulled back into this thing again, just when I thought I was done. But that is kind of what we do, though, right? Like, we are the guardians of the narrative, and like, it's not like you just do it and then you're done, right? Like, I had to do it for the rest. I had to come back, and we had GraphQL. Now there's going to be another chapter in this narrative, and I'm like the protector of the storytelling, essentially. I'm the protector of the technical validity and the way that it's expressed externally to our partners. Like, I'm the final person on the front lines that, like, it can go out the door. Like, I could have let it out the door wrong. Like, nobody would have stopped me. But it's that, I feel like that's my code that I have to uphold as a tech writer. And I feel like maybe that's what, like, if I'm looking for something to say that defines me or differentiates me from, like, marketing or head of UX or whatever, maybe it's that I have to go up against these monsters and battle these monsters, and I have this code to uphold about what I'm willing to let out into the wild and what I'm not willing to let out into the wild. Yeah, as Tom puts it in his blog post, you sometimes have to act like an insane person to get your job done. And my feeling is that we are all prone to a bit of this insane, over-the-top behavior, because we know we are often all that stands between erroneous information going out into the world or not. We have our code to maintain. I already said that. I liken it a little bit to the dark rider protecting the flame at the end of Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men. He rode past me and kept going, never said nothing. He just rode on past, and he had this blanket wrapped around him, and he had his head down. And when he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire in a horn, the way people used to do. And I could see the horn from the light inside it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead, and that he was fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in the dark, and all that I could, in all that dark and cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he would be there. So yeah, we're like we're protectors of the truth out in the dark night. We also have this concept of tripwires that's been popularized at Shopify recently. And the basic idea behind a tripwire is that it's like a service level objective, or an SLO, that helps to maintain operational quality, which is basically another way of saying it helps you fuck up less. And I like to think that tech writers are like the last line of tripwires before the company fucks up. So what the fuck is a tech writer? Here we are at the end of our little talk for today. Can we decide with any degree of certainty and answer this ages-old question? So yes, the last tripwire, the protector of your company's brand and trust. Monster killers disguised as unassuming writerly types. A bit like a wizard in Harry Potter. We may look a bit scruffy and wear nerdy glasses, but we have battle scars, and we can defeat Voldemort if we have to. There we are. This is my one go-to joke on slides. Is I get a slide and then I like have little arrows. It's like my favorite thing to do when I give talks. Right. Okay. Awesome. So that's it for my my little introduction about what the fuck is a technical writer. And so hopefully that's been a little bit of food for thought for you all, and maybe we'll inspire some more storytelling tonight. We would like you to disperse yourselves into little groups. Did you want to come up, Angela, and give a little kick this thing off?
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Angela, although you all saw me at the door, so yeah.
Hi.
It's amplified. Okay, so we're going to do a little group activity. We thought, you know, in the light of it being the holiday season, one of the things that you do during the holiday season is you tell spooky stories. So maybe you'll have a positive, a great story about a time when you could really see the value of the work that you want to share, or maybe you'll have a story about a time when maybe you had your own dark night of the soul and you had to go and you know, fend off the monster. If we're going to extend our metaphor, I have these little sheets here for you to keep track of some of your ideas. The idea is just kind of tell some stories in these small groups. We've got folks here for, I think, 4 groups. We may as well just stick with where you are. We've got a group here. We've got a group on the bench here. We've got a group here, and we've got a group at the back. So I'll distribute these and make sure that if you need to take notes, you've got a pen. But these are just to kind of jog your ideas a little bit, give you some conversation starters. Andrew copied them up on the slides here, but they're here as well. And how long are we going to chat for before we?
Well, that's a good question. So it's 7 o'clock now, and we are asking that one member of each group, although more members could if they want, but we'd ask like a minimum of one member will come up and do a little, give a little story.
Yeah, so we're trying to choose, you know, kind of one of the more compelling stories that come out of your conversation, or you can, you know, create a composite story to mask the identities of the concerned parties, and find a volunteer in your group who would like to come up and share a story, tell a spooky story for the group. And we're thinking like 1 to 2 minutes, like it's not a thing. So we'll spend about 10 or 15 minutes just sitting in our groups and chatting and telling some of the stories of times when, you know, documentation mattered.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll do that till about 7:15. And then Jen's going to come up and run the raffle so that you guys can win some cool tech writing swag. And then after the raffle, we'll do our the group presentations. And then you're free to leave. Or if you want, you can come hang out with me at Brown Social House on Elgin. If you feel like coming to have a drink. Or if you have any questions about the presentation.
Stories first. Yeah. Then we can have
whoever goes up can decide.
Yeah.
Which stuff do they want to say?
Good, this is like interview practice. Oh yes. Referees like this. All right, who wants to go first with their spooky story? All right.
Have a time when you saw the power of good.
Sorry, come upstairs.
I have my elevator speech.
Good thing. Andrew.
Oh, okay. Those are your stories, wouldn't they? Good. It doesn't have to be our. It doesn't have to be.
I'm not really a technical writer.
It doesn't have to be for my students.
I could do stuff around technical writing.
Do you do documentation?
Obviously,
For elections project.
Yeah.
So I do have some of the horror story stuff. Not a full-time tech writer.
Okay, so you do documentation, you do open source, so it means that you probably have less confidentiality than professionals. So you probably have better stories.
Well, I also work
I
with
can take that.
that stuff is different.
You're
Red tape. Yeah. I've done that.
Is that like that probability and no? But then again,
I'm sure others with all your work, even if they're skeptical.
This job I just finished. Accidentally, a technical
Hour with documentation.
that's still cool. That's like
They ignored it.
super personal kind of. I don't have that.
There isn't a like
You don't notice it because it was.
that's a problem. Are you doing
The magma? Okay.
What kind of
So as part of my having a VA write article or a Dura story. So actually, scripts. Probably write them properly, and I don't have to really. That doesn't make any sense.
And they didn't tell any of the people
How does
the
the document actually transfer? It's not a guessing game. It's actually going to as opposed to the VAs are like, we're going to give you as little bit as possible, and it I hope you're right.
I don't think that. There's a new software release, but there's no like handoff training. So you're like, oh, I've been here 2 years. I'm just gonna like click and like figure out what is new and what's next. And the CBC, so I find like Boeing may have kind of more lockdown.
I really appreciate Agile's project for that reason. Because like when the waterfall, you're just, as I was saying to you, you don't really know how anything works, but you're just writing everything all at once and hoping that it works.
Oh, no,
When it's sprint projects, you're actually like 2 to 3 weeks, you're going through the project being like, oh yes, this did work, this is what didn't work, and this is how it works.
It's a bigger problem.
Then well, that society is also coming out small portions at a time.
Latest one again. I like waterfall.
Documentation.
Yeah, especially the organization. Like use it and use it. You know, platform section is like the whole platform kind of guides. It was like one day it was like partner was looking at the documentation.
So it got good enough to
and then it was like a eureka, like I don't know, something clicked. And I'm like, oh my god.
Made for like UI
Oh my god, like now I understand what's going on so much now, but I think that was the biggest thing. I wasn't expecting to write it at that time.
Is your title
writer? Something very
Before I knew
like a meeting.
Here's the software.
I don't really think that having people aren't
I think that was
And client support.
Well, partners, you say partners,
Yeah.
don't think of partners.
The problem where somebody will your rival would be like, we are texting them how to do it.
That's really
Yeah.
Yeah, you switch like that.
Yeah.
So I can't do a horror story.
I was reading
So-
something the other
So I'm
day.
calling myself.
I have heard API documentation is valuable in general because API calls are not discoverable except through documentation. And I looked this up. There's like
That's pretty cool.
there's he's like a computer science researcher. He's just like, well, the perfect REST API is totally discoverable, and you should be able to make calls and sort out the whole thing. I'm like, wait, does this actually exist? They're like, it's like something to experiment with. Done by a few people. I don't think we're anywhere near that.
Some of those self-documented.
I can only think of times when I saw the power.
Open API
I
stuff,
went to
but
a
it's
talk
not-
one time.
Depends what you put in. And I have like a lot of description.
Oh, I see.
Follow
Okay,
their
yeah.
scripture.
In our
Yeah, Swagger just like documents the calls, right? It doesn't give the
Right, yeah.
yes, you don't think you don't
All you really get is a little
there.
tag to fill in some descriptions.
Yeah, yeah.
guy out there, it doesn't matter.
Right, yeah.
It's a lot.
I know.
Kind of like create a
When I was a kid, I
owner's
had the whole camera.
way that we were documenting it.
Yeah, that's
They got kind of like, oh, we're gonna have developers write it, spit it out. But it was like,
So
it
it,
didn't come to us.
So I was happy when I grew up.
So what was spit out was like a long list of little information. And then people were just writing this stuff that it was missing the new stuff because
But I had
they
just
wouldn't
learned, right,
told
so
that
how
we
to
had
create
great picture. Then we ended up with clearly, at least we had a way of saying that spit out the man.
Just all the good stories. Oh, yeah? Oh, no, we're still.
But it's
I think a lot of people have studies.
Some other professionals.
International designers as well, otherwise you get like battleship break forms. functional.
It was
It's not that pretty.
Canadian
Usable.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because like sometimes the way these
amazing.
works,
Beautiful.
like in that particular case, it was kind of like, rethink your docs suck on the KPIs. But it didn't win the prize because of the crash. And then it just fell on her face. And then it was kind of like, okay, we're that's what we're supposed to do. And then after that, we
All across the
there was that kind of like mutual.
Like a lot of people, I think they like.
Yeah, I think that's key. Like, I think sometimes people try to automate docs because they see it as like a chore, but they want to not think about it. And I don't think that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we know
And
some.
the only nice one I see is the automation is just the fact that they're up to date. That's the only one where something gets out of sync.
exactly.
Maybe it's just a TBD that you're getting news, or at least you know there's supposed to be something.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think the placeholders come to me like that's something where
So what
like
example do we
I don't know.
want
I inherited docs where there's these little lines that say something like examples coming soon.
The partner one, there's.
Last
Yeah,
time.
probably
That
might be.
Like,
The partner guy.
I haven't started.
Oh, it's the same one.
I mean,
So
it's
kind of
okay.
looking forward to that when I start doing stuff.
I'm thinking it was coming
Coming
soon.
Step 4, next, step 5, TBD. 1 hour.
Yeah, update the policy, just say like coming slowly but surely at a consistent rate.
I'm
Okay,
also.
so they're
deprecating me getting rid of it. I don't know.
Yeah, and someone mentioned was like, just to rub the salt in the other person, like TV was like,
And
oh, I
then
noticed
it's
this
always like,
soon.
I wanted to
So
hear, like, oh no, what did I talk wrong?
Where the voice
So
they're like,
yeah, you're just like blindly writing like all of these like really
Yeah.
elevated permission
Present the picture.
commands. I don't care as long as it works. See the picture. I just want to work.
If you don't have that, you set it right. Your test version.
Now I gotta say, I'm
Trying to figure it
all
out.
of it's faster. You like me, you
Oh, yeah.
and I know that the government is a lot of like computing to go
I
do
was,
sometimes.
going to mention that I found that
It's all the screenshots are.
that kind of like,
Even though the content's
call it
correct.
kind of saying like, oh, this is why we
Yeah.
have this feature. This is
Just
why
have
it's
Phoenix,
so-
the next release.
I find those
Just
to get
all
some.
of
Oh, they leave me.
I was really happy when someone
Well,
like,
images
switched it
were
and
out
said
the
like, no, right to the version
Yeah.
is.
Have you
and
seen
have things like,
This, some people are starting to use these like
you know,
sort of abstract.
supported with certain
Yeah, yeah.
but you don't have the history of why it changed. That just gets you know,
That's
so
it shows you,
some of the
like
where-
I know
clean it up.
Yeah.
Like,
So like,
I don't know how-
right details maybe in the lower left.
some of the
That's
things.
what we're sharing.
I mean, it's useful, you're saying like
Yeah.
But you do lose something, so for me, it's hard to.
information.
I don't know, like theoretically, that kind of information coming out like a change log.
Sure, when she was 3 releases.
And
Yeah, I'm, those are good examples. I can't think of anything else myself.
One thing I wondered that
Where they- Where someone came and said, well, your documentation is really outstanding.
every day there is a new feature or something.
No, it doesn't have enough.
Documentation.
Yeah. it
People
doesn't
who
have
demo
enough.
it, they
What
are
often
something.
is good is talking about
Yeah,
how
they're
it's
like, do we have anything
like monsters. For
like
me, it's
Scrum or something that they
caring.
And the tech writers, they should be writing it, and they should be doing it. If they're not doing the job, they need to be out on it.
They have to kind of answer fix Scrum meeting.
Right in there, get the
Oh, they have to
testing.
be involved, yeah.
Mishmash, yeah.
Yeah, right.
So I started
I know that most of the other tech writers. do
Right,
not
right,
have
yeah, so what did you do for that?
You have like certain technical meetings, they just go to demos, that's the way that they not. Meetings instead, there's like a demo. at the end, And that's demo.
How does this work?
Right, yeah, well, so that
Ah.
were lots of the retrofit at the end.
So do we have?
Like the end of their-
The NS sprint, yeah,
Yeah,
but like this, for example, our
Usually it's just-
journalist will
you know, like
understand our signups.
solving a
So if there's
problem.
anything,
Yeah,
maybe there's like a
How do I-
impediment, you can actually.
Yeah, I don't know if they check one of
Or
every.
product,
Yeah.
product,
Yeah.
also right there, so
Yeah.
VA.
That's awesome.
I don't have an
VAs are
elevator.
generally our calls with us because they can
Like my elevator,
Yeah.
it's like
Something that's going on, especially if there's a break. We'll have, if we have a problem or we don't understand something, we have to write out and we call that person out on it. And we also have all have to come to a conclusion. Like if you have your team, realize that your VA is not writing the right information and it's not concise. As a team, you guys have to come out and say, we want this person to start writing in more detail. And as a team, we have decided that this has to happen because potentially the Scrum Master is not really in charge of anything. They just have to make sure things are getting done based on what the team is asking of them.
That's so, that's less than one floor traveling.
Yeah.
Two of them traveling on the elevator. You're traveling on an elevator, so everything. And in that time, you tell them what you're doing.
No, for sure. I go to stand-up times, some of the, release planning, some of the stuff that happens at the outset. It's like I come back and get her.
No.
Especially stand-up, walkers.
Strangers to what am I working on?
Yeah.
There's like
Where's my dog?
in the racket program.
Yeah.
So when I,
Like, wait, I feel like you're not really planning your,
And it's basically like you're writing
pushy
code, but
tasks to you.
to
Yeah.
document
Maybe I'm like,
Yeah.
flashing them.
Yeah, I know, what's that? Yeah.
I tend to pull in tasks.
But technically, that's what you are supposed to do.
That nobody
Because
reads.
you assign yourself as long as the work is getting done and you're within that sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I'm not present at the
I'm like,
meeting,
Outsold our administration.
Oh, so if you don't, because technically that's good. Yeah, that way you can tell them what you're doing. You don't have to only a 2-minute thing, right? Say, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing.
yeah, for sure.
But if for example,
I had to write a lot of like vanilla
Or
jobs.
I had to do these
for
statements
HTML, but
when Paul Buck was
That's
still
what
in,
you
he had a
can
problem,
say, hey,
PA had a problem with
apologies on
customer,
because
they were down in the state and they were
Really,
really upset about the problem
Yeah.
in the product and, I think it had to do with,
no. And
so when they could get some,
Ours was a business.
they didn't know what they were
and
supposed
it's
to do.
really painful.
They make a
So it's
call,
like, I
they
just-
But
talk
what
about
I found
how
is like
staff, where do they get information? Oh, that was the other thing, they complained about all the information being all over the place, right? Oh, yay.
It's deprecated now, but
So Paul Buck, Tara,
um,
Laura Knowles,
but you can write stuff kind of like
client advocate and I met with this
to like define or
customer.
replace text.
And he,
I'm also
Which
just
is like
so.
have like a separate
Problem.
document that's
and then
like
we had to go
it's like
away
we
and
write
write.
like little
Yeah, I do.
Whole document.
I prefer now like
They-
a wire
and then like
just because
like
company
anything
say
Lois
working with
will
get the
add
information.
If
He
I'm
wanted
doing
it all
it,
in one place.
I find that most people will listen
at
to
the
me
end
if
use
there's
from the
a
macro.
problem. They'll like
Well, because I was the
whereas
only one who was available at the time.
they have to actually.
But so yeah, so
But
we, the thing was like everybody,
Interesting.
gave
I don't know. We've been
their
doing
content,
our
right?
new,
Like Paul and Laura
Yeah,
and
it's not that
and
much
stuff, right?
different before
And we had
everybody was out
came
of
up with
that
a
was when
20-page
technical
document
efforts out of
Really?
information for the
Right, so
customer,
I
and
just
it
remind
didn't make
you
them happy
really
again.
I've been
That's
asking
like-
Paul
was really, really
might
good.
Yes,
replace
that's
like
what you
all
view
I
is
can't remember the
if you
Yeah.
have a part of it done,
and you like
you
use
can
microplace
actually
two things.
divide
It
the
was
point
kinda-
like it's too high of a point value. So let's divide
Down the story and
another sprint. So then they get back to
Yeah.
so you're back to
Government.
yeah. So say for example, your
Where
this
and,
particular object is supposed to
Exactly.
and receive it, but also it's supposed to download the address. But because it's such a long
right now,
process,
okay.
you can say, well, this needs to be defined as a bulk. Break down the actual things.
divide things to the outside.
Some stuff can be agile.
So how do you have these?
Some groups can be agile. Some people just read that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I remember we had this-
You have like week
That's right, yeah.
Like, there's no opportunity.
Yeah, we'll do that in.
It's like, what you think might be this like a
I'm gonna be
point
called on to present.
Right.
and a PhD pointer because of things that we're not
We have
anticipating.
to show them everything.
Okay. That was when we had that group, social media team that came, we acquired them. But that was when we were sitting on, you know.
Guys, we got a pretty strong take.
What do you mean?
We got a good Mary story. We got a good.
It must have been PMQ.
They won't be satisfied.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, because I know with this friend, they can't do it any longer than.
I don't know, I just
But-
remember.
I don't remember what the building looked like.
Just say and then whoever.
Yeah.
Oh,
So what are we? Hey, what are we?
There's
documentation.
Yeah.
But I don't.
There's no
I don't know
product
what
situation.
Yeah.
I like
So I did.
I'm actually like not calling.
Trying to make this work.
But here, junior developers, 10. Here we're all.
What did we?
Yeah.
What
Sorry.
what we were gonna talk about?
You should be ready.
You know, you don't want to.
Like,
Oh, Danny, no,
maybe we can talk about.
And then this is
Yeah.
two different
That's super awesome.
Exactly.
We all share
Everyone
stories.
Boom, boom, boom. Like that.
Oh, yeah.
We all share
Help us
stories.
give training teach. I know the project, but if you don't know the project at all, you should for me. Chances are
Okay, you can have 5 of mine.
When I was
Or not, because
renting, we're not even.
Another, we could,
Oh, yeah,
we
that's
could talk
actually
about
but
it.
it was the time to do a project, because I feel like when he was telling us stories, it was just reminding me
So
of
you
so
could
many
really say like this topic is
things.
popular,
You started believing
and we kind of had like.
Well, we don't really have a
I'm
story.
great.
Oh,
Yeah, I read it, and like the
that's all.
conclusion was
Yeah, they
basically
just
struggled for a while,
We're
and
trying
he
to
eventually
decide if
went to
we're
like his PO, his product
Yeah,
owner for help,
yeah,
and got blocked, and he assigned someone to it. And like, honestly, my impression is just like, why are you so afraid to do that here? Like, like, what kind of culture you working at? You're afraid to say like, I'm having trouble here.
Okay, yeah.
Is that self-imposed though? Might be self-imposed. I think it is self-imposed.
I'm a content.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Idea.
I'm actually a technical.
Yeah, exactly.
Writers actually.
So we call myself.
Yeah,
Because they were
but I went
supposed
to,
Yeah.
And like, for example, the story about how we have the account,
Yeah.
so my first thought is, what was the analyst or the
and one of the
product owner?
topics of the
was their
presentation, one of the talks was on
they're
all
the
the
ones who are
different
supposed to be
titles
looking
and all the different sort of
They're the ones
segregated,
financing, so they also have
just like quasi roles that are really technical writing or something.
Oh, okay.
Things like information
In a nice
architect,
agile
developer, information
Yeah.
developer,
Yeah.
yeah,
Learning concepts.
oh, yeah, 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 yeah,
I actually think this story reminds me of this.
yeah, it's
Because
really
the
interesting.
beginning troubleshooting video.
I think it's life
And
and death
I was like, I don't quite know how to set up a VPN. I kind of think I do.
Mhm.
And then it became more and more complicated.
They're getting
carried on.
Yeah,
And they were
yeah.
like, oh, you would
Yeah.
want
You need to be
technical
in
assistance.
society as a
And
whole,
they
and the news
finally
outlet for
realized
1
now.
hour to be conscious.
And I was like, you gave me a brick that I can't even.
It had to go document,
Yeah.
because they were planning not having
It's
any.
a requirement.
I,
So we
I
kind of not allow you to
met somebody
over
from
there.
Facebook
But
and
let's
used
go
for
ahead.
her
Okay,
Like
they only realized that.
We only realized that 10 days
Over
before.
a month.
developer information architect, something
Like,
like that,
Is it
is
a
they
place where
found
you
that it
can
was
deploy an
really
app and like,
difficult to get
So
the
I have a
attention of
choice. Like,
development team without having a developer
you
title.
know, you kind of bang your head
And that
against
just
the wall,
fascinates
and
me.
eventually you're like,
When
I
I
am
like
drowning in
information,
this thing.
Yeah.
Might be able to
More
do
something.
and you can
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
get a project.
Yeah.
That's certainly it's like
So
a
I
bid.
feel like you've done the best.
Yeah,
you
for
can
sure.
at a
Yeah,
certain
yeah.
point.
Well, I mean,
You
you know,
know
definitely
what
has
you
this,
can.
like,
Then
Like
you
you
should
start
know
anybody
what
can
not
be a
to
writer
do.
attitude, that writing is easy, which is always
And you say
I feel like that's kind of the goal.
and so it might be just a little like, wishy-washiness around the word writer, like.
The first one, I kind of think like anytime you have someone
Should be
who
the
has
word title, I don't know, but.
got good technical documentation.
Yeah, and I know, so my organization
They're not there waiting for accounts or
started
whatever it
changing
is.
everything to
Oh, yeah.
experiences.
That's
It actually gives them something to do and actually
Mhm.
gather
That's more like
line,
it's
like design.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
right,
So I don't-
yeah.
Spend your time.
Yeah.
It's sort of a,
So where are you situated?
How to run the servers.
yeah, so I have a manager who manages
She's having that
everything,
every other,
but then
like
we're in a design.
cloud, and then it took
Okay,
so
yeah.
debate and
Yeah.
other kind of view of cloud,
Yeah.
spin it out.
What about the
like, Amazon,
The elevator pitch.
You know.
I've just finished a contract.
Topic of this thing is like, makes a good
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Like,
true.
I
Oh,
just,
wow.
like, they had it and every single time he's like, I don't really understand what like, this is what I do. And so far it's
Right,
like,
right, wow, yeah.
Product success, not good.
I like it best.
Just Amazon listings. I mean, just you said
I
it.
would
What's
love to
that?
do our,
It's a-
yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
like clarify
Like I am
There was a
fine.
time when our team
Yeah, you like
was
Like I am fine also.
Yeah, right.
but we're not really
the
part of the
tech program
development
should be able to
team or
communicate that, but still, I'm just meeting eventually.
Yeah.
UX, and that's pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
So do you guys participate in the agile?
The name is.
Explain it
So-
RTFM.
Some people do. So
Right.
we,
We do a calendar block.
Okay, we're gonna talk. Are you gonna talk?
Mapping to the
Are we all
development
talking?
team, so I work with like 6
I think I've
development teams. Some of them use
This is
Agile.
like my first.
heard those manuals.
Some of them
you don't
invite me,
read
some of
it.
them
Well,
don't.
say for the job.
So I
That's the value.
and then we do a.
Not a style guide, is I have one of those.
Can you go without the microphone?
Have your
All
own.
right, folks. Well, we're gonna have a little break before we do our presentations. And okay, Jen here is gonna get me to draw the winning raffle number. So hold on to your hats.
I think
Here we go.
I think I helped.
Does everyone have their tickets out?
It is.
It's very exciting.
Because you have to be looking at your ticket, or else I'll be calling these numbers.
Bueller.
And we'll have no winner, and it'll be terrible, scandalous. Okay, I'm looking for 8793511.
Oh,
The guy that I was talking to before the event, conspicuously up here for like 10 minutes. So clearly we know each other. Show him what he's won, Jen.
You get your choice of one of two fabulous prizes.
Oh, wow.
Little one or bigger one.
Little one or bigger one.
But I don't get to know what they are.
No.
Oh, that's.
Choose the big one.
Go big or go home, right? I know what's in the big. What's in the big one.
So do I open it?
Yeah, what is it?
Oh, it's a chapter
Like
description certificate.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, books. All right, let's hear it for Drew. And then we're gonna do another one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, 2 winners. We don't just have 1 winner, right? The doc. We got 2 winners. You know, that's cool. Spread the winning around. 8793510.
Oh, there you go.
The other guy was talking to you up here before the event for 7 minutes. Clearly the fix is in here. This is no, I call bullshit on this full meetup.
Thank you.
All right, let's hear it for him. All right, groups, this is the time to come up and bare your soul and show us some vulnerability and wholeheartedness. Did you want to take the mic from here, Angela? I had the privilege of sitting over there and participating in that chat, and I can tell you it was really fun, and I learned a lot. I hope you all would enjoy it as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. I hope that some of you got to share some stories, some commiserations with your fellow documentation enthusiasts. So did anybody get a story or come up with something that they wanted to tell the larger group? Any highlights, anything exciting, juicy tidbits? Nobody's gonna volunteer.
Jesse does. For sure.
Jesse has something. Jesse, would you like to talk here? So you gotta come talking to the microphone because we're recording for posterity for the people who are interested in participating in our event, but who are not able to be here tonight. And the microphone is the only way that they can hear us. So there you go.
And if you maneuver yourself a little bit over to where Angela is, you'll even be picked up by the camera. If that's something that interests
This is
you.
less nervous if I do this. I'm less nervous. Yeah, so we went around the table asking people what they did, and 2 of us were technical writers. both of us were into like programming and IT and stuff like that. One of us was a risk analyst actually in the government, which I thought was pretty cool. And the other one was a software developer at Carleton. So yeah, that's profiling right there.
Team A.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the people from our group, one of the big, what was the first question? Describe a time when you saw the power of good documentation. Okay, so this was the kind of the opposite of that, where there was no power of good documentation. They worked in a tech company that got bought by another. Sorry, I don't know if it's a tech company that got by another company, and they had to write docs that didn't exist, like none at all, and it was for basically a bunch of code, and they needed it ready in 3 months. So they got to kind of write everything from scratch, from the ground up, which they thought it was a really cool experience. Because you don't often come into a company and then there's nothing at all. Blah blah blah. What else do we have here? So yeah, another one was they liked programming as a hobby, and when they first realized how to read programming documentation, it was kind of a eureka for them. So that was pretty cool. They found out the power of documentation through hobby programming.
I haven't had that breakthrough yet. Like I'm on the MDN docs for JavaScript.
Oh,
and I don't know how. Like I haven't figured out how the, you know what I mean, like the rubric or whatever of like.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that sidebar confuses me.
Maybe you can help.
I can try. But I can't promise anything. Another one was flirting with Game Maker. It's a DSL for making games, and they thought the documentation was great for that because it included like screenshots and step-by-steps on how to do everything. So they're really happy to be able to use those docs to create cool games at home. What was that one? Read my own writing. Oh, there was one. Someone mentioned that they were also using. What question am I on right now? I'm just plowing through my notes. I'm just gonna keep talking through my notes because I don't know which one I'm on. One person had a lot of fun using grep. It's a Unix command line tool to find all the strings that the programmers, all the typos the programmers made. So they just looked up everything in between quotation marks and just corrected everything in between there, and then everything was built and fixed. The person who did risk analysis, someone had left their team. I think they were promoted, and they were kind of left without anything. They didn't know what to do, and luckily they found risk analysis processes that they could follow online, so they could use documentation to follow through with their job, which is pretty cool. And let me try to at least address one other one. Okay, how about the second last one? How have you shown others the value of your work, even if they've been skeptical? Okay, no, sorry, it's the second one. My bad. I'm trying to match notes to this. They actually worked at Heroku before, and they got to write some of the documentation that appears on the dashboard for statistics on the website. I hope I got that right. But yeah, they got to develop a lot of front-end stuff that users were facing, whether it's demo users or paid users. And yeah, I'm sorry I didn't hit all these, but.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you. Yeah, great. There's lots of good stories out there. Yeah.
Okay.
Any of the other groups have a story that they wanted to share? I'm going to give you my elevator pitch because quite frequently, actually, people ask me what it is that I do. My neighbor most recently, when we were getting off the bus, she said, "Oh, what is it you do anyway?" And I said, "Well, I'm a technical writer. At Shopify, I write the help documentation, the articles to help people use the product." And she said, "Well, that sounds really boring." I like to tell people that I'm a translator, that I take the technical product that we have, the software, and I translate it into the language that our end users, for entrepreneurs, the business language that they're used to seeing. And then I translate it in such a way that they might actually be able to follow along with some steps and complete a task that they need to do. But I like to think of myself as a translator. I'm going between the product development teams and our end users who, you know, they may be very technically savvy, but they may not. You know, the Shopify store that they build could be the very first time that they've tried to build a website. And so, yeah, I like to think of myself as a translator. That's my elevator pitch. Any other stories?
I'll do
Team B.
Excellent.
so
Thanks,
I'll
Bruce.
just address the first bullet, which doesn't really mean that it has to be about stuff we did.
Is this working?
So this is actually about a Facebook post that I made a month ago or something, and it was a story about a NASA space shuttle. I forget the name of it, but it in 2003 there was this tragedy, and this thing burnt coming into the atmosphere, and 7 astronauts died. And so there's this really, you know, sad but interesting article about the root cause. And so all these engineers had done this testing and presented this one PowerPoint slide, which I would show you. Can I put it on here maybe?
You might
Where's
be
the
able
camera?
to. Andrew knows how to do everything.
Where's the camera?
Oh, you want to like send something from your phone?
Doesn't matter.
Oh.
It's just one.
I wish I could have accommodated
It's
that.
one
That would've been
PowerPoint
so cool.
slide. I was just thinking I could hold it up to the camera.
Where's the camera?
Anyways, just in summary, it's a bunch of.
Yeah, it's right over
Is
there.
that it? Yeah, do it.
Let's see what this.
That's a low tech solution.
Oh, I get
There
it.
we go. See,
Here's when I bring it closer and wait like a second.
You gotta turn. You gotta
Yeah.
turn. Oh, yeah, there you go. Why is it?
Oh, yeah. How do we do that? If someone has their camera.
The most important information that ended up being life-threatening was put in this small bullet saying that, you know, there's a risk that the sentence was minor variations in total energy above penetration level can cause significant tile damage. And if you look at the fonts on this thing, it's the smallest font of all these lines. So these engineers just threw this into some Microsoft Word file, and everyone ended up just looking at the header and glossing over the serious problem. So again, it's an example of the converse, I guess, of that, which is the implications of bad documentation. Luckily, what we do doesn't threaten our lives, but in some cases it does.
Wow.
That's my story.
Yeah, definitely share that link. Andrew can post it to our group.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And maybe that is also something like that relates to what we were talking about earlier about what defines tech writers, and maybe like trying to like, you know, catch that kind of information and make it more prevalent in the way that it's published or whatever. Yeah, that's another thing that we can add in our role.
Kate, I see you making your way up here. I'm gonna give you the microphone here. I know the microphone is terribly awkward.
I can't resist. This isn't the results of what we were working on at my table, but I feel that this is an important conversation that we're having tonight. Actually, what is technical writing? What's a technical writer? And I think as a society, we're losing it, and it's our responsibility to bring those concepts back. When I similar to what you were thinking of, there was the O-ring problem on the Challenger, but also more recently, the CBC reported the Boeing 737 problem as a training problem.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it was. They said the pilots were desperately trying to leaf through the manuals to find how to get the nose up, and and couldn't figure it out. So if it was a training problem, that's bad, but if it was a documentation problem, that's even worse. And I don't know that the CBC knows the difference. I've been working on the Phoenix pay system, and I'm convinced the reason that failed was that the people doing it did not have the basic concepts around what documentation is. And it's always referred to as a training problem. I think it's a documentation problem. And I see the STC talking about content all the time. Content, well, that's pretty vague. I know there's a huge demand for content and we all want to have jobs, but I don't think we should be throwing the user guide out with the content bathwater or combining it with training, or I think we need to be clear on what technical writing is and good user instructions. And I think we need to outreach that to the rest of society. I think it's important.
Bravo.
Yeah, we had a pretty interesting conversation going on back there about different job titles that are falling under the umbrella of technical writer. And I'll try to remember to share something. I have some a talk that I saw at Writers UA East in North Carolina a year ago that had to do with job titles and the different sort of muddy waters around what it is to be a technical writer. So I'll try to remember to share that in our group as well. Yeah. Anybody else? So much good stuff. So many great ideas.
We're missing a representative from group two.
While they decide who to pick on, we'll let you talk here. Yeah.
So similar to the last message, I was meeting. Sorry, to pull the finger.
I'm gonna tell your
Trying
story.
to pass on the message.
Sort of work out right away.
So my son plays
That might be
volleyball,
a good one.
and
Yeah, might be a good idea.
I was meeting
I like
different
your
parents, and when you meet new parents, you ask each other,
There
what
has
do
to
you do?
be some sort of
So with the first
commitment
parent, I said I work for IBM, I'm a
estimate.
technical writer, and they didn't know what a technical writer was.
Instead
Next
of just
parent,
being,
I said I'm a content developer, and then I tried to refine it so that the next parent would understand what I did. And eventually, the easiest one was I write stuff I write information and assets to help users of our products use our products. So yeah, it is a complicated challenge, especially if you're looking for work, job postings. You see different titles all the time: technical writer, content developer, information architect, documentation specialist. It's a big challenge. But I do have a story that kind of lines up with the whole WTF concept of today. So it was one time I was pulled into a meeting with my manager and my senior manager, and they were notified by a product team that we were releasing a product on the cloud, which is a new platform that we've never published yet. And they didn't realize that they needed documentation, and they were releasing in 10 days. And Andrew might appreciate this because there was REST API documentation that was required, reference material, everything. 10 days. Can you do it? I didn't have a choice. We did it, and that was an example where we made an impact, and we appreciated the work we did. Yeah.
Nice.
Thank you. I saw you putting your heads together back there. Did somebody want to come up and talk? You don't have to. It's just if you got something.
Do it, Taylor.
You can do it. We believe in you.
Yeah. Are you?
Woo!
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Awesome. So my name's Kayla, and our group is kind of developers and tech writers, and we went back and forth over quite a few different items. They were egging me on to share my story on API documentation. So one of the companies that I've worked for, we were documenting our command line interface. And generally, the feedback about our CLI reference was pretty poor. So in general, people did not view it as great. People were always vocally complaining about it. So what had happened in our experience was that it was kind of handed off where the developers decided that they were going to take the ball back on this one and create an automated tool that would spit out, a full and comprehensive CLI reference. However, it wasn't done in step with documentation. So the way in practice that it ended up working out was that they had a very comprehensive list that was spit out that included every single item. But the text descriptions were not comprehensive. They were not complete and they didn't help the user fully. So coming out of it, there were actually twice as many complaints. People were crying for the old one. People missed it. People started using the out-of-date one from several versions ago. And there was such a big outcry that it got given right back to us. But at that point, it was established that there is value in documentation. And there was appreciation that, like, this is a difficult task. Like, we didn't quite realize what we had taken on. And after that point, we were able to work more in step. And then we got to the point where we did built-in help text in our CLI where you could just enter it in and then it would spit out the options. And it was more of a pairing them hand in hand. And kind of like what Jill was saying, there was the investment and kind of the understanding that, it wasn't just a chore to get done. It was something that, we needed to invest in for our users. So that was kind of our takeaway.
Thank you so much. These are just great. It's commiseration. It's learning from one another's experiences and just seeing how varied the playing field is for documentarians right now. But it's really great to hear these stories. Thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, give yourselves all a round of applause. Yeah, so thanks again for being here. I guess we're gonna we usually wrap things up around 8, so feel free to stick around. We'll stick on some more music and feel free to chat and whatever until around 8, and then we'll sort of start cleaning things up. So thanks again to Angela and Jen for being here tonight and helping to sort of set everything up and run everything so smoothly, and all the other people that have been volunteering for Write the Docs at Shopify over the year to make things run so smoothly every night. So let's give them a round of applause. And I'm gonna miss you guys, man. We're not gonna see each other till February, because we do take a couple of months off. We take December off because, like, yeah, God, December.
Yeah.
And then January. Oof, really. Yeah, take January to bounce back, and then February we'll start running again with our programming. So look out for some messages from me, I guess, on Meetup in 2021.
So that's not next year. 2020 is next year.
What?
You're a year ahead of yourself.
Traveler.
When that happened, that actually happened to me once we got into the new millennium in the year 2000. I stopped thinking that the laws of real time applied to me. So since then, it's the 2000 times that I live in. Okay, what was the next thing I wanted to say? My whole train of thought got derailed there. Because I'm apparently living 1 year in the future. It's kind of a big moment for me right now.
Browns.
Oh yeah, that's right. So if you want to continue to hang out or whatever, feel free to come chat with me, and we can go over to Browns and have a drink and do something kind of merry and festive for the holiday times. And otherwise, we'll see you all in 2021. Good night and good luck.
I wanted to
You're a good presenter. You hold that together.
Oh, thank you. I feel like
Who won the US election, Andrew?
You're the product owner.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that was a good idea.
Yeah. And we like to try to keep this last one like very tangible.
Yeah, there's a lot of red.
So now we have our own.
Oh, yeah,